and it's Natasha Khamashta. Is that right?
Perfect. Yes.
Natasha Khamashta, thank you so very much for joining me on JT the LA Storyteller podcast. This is a special episode to inform listeners about these mysterious, enigmatic seats that they'll be seeing on their ballot as soon as they get to their voting center this Tuesday, March 5th. You are running a special race that I definitely want to inform our listenership about. So, what we're going to do is have you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about the special circumstances surrounding your candidacy, because isn't it all so much fun?
It is all so much fun. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. And my candidacy is special because I'm a write-in candidate. It became official February the 13th of just this year, so just a couple weeks ago. And yeah, I became a write-in candidate for office number 93 for judge of the Los Angeles County Superior Court. And I did that because on February the 7th, when I opened up my ballot at home, I saw that Deputy District Attorney Victor Avila was running unopposed. And for several months now, since November, I have been assisting my fellow public defenders that are actually on the ballot with their campaigns. And I have gone to dozens and dozens of meetings across the county, judicial forums, holiday parties, endorsement meetings, you name it. And I've never seen Victor Avila. And because he's running unopposed, I'm sure he just thought he didn't have to do anything, which is accurate because when a person is running unopposed, they're going to get all the votes and then he'll just step right into the office. And so I instinctively wrote my name down when I saw that he was running unopposed. It was like out of sight, out of mind. I did not even realize that this was happening. And, several people have asked me why. And, I'm going to be straight up blunt. I'm Palestinian. October 7th happened. The unfortunate events of October 7th really rocked my world and every other Palestinians across the globe. And then several weeks later, my younger brother, Jimmy, he's only 33 years old, and he was living in Bet Jala, which is my hometown in the West Bank, had a stroke and died. And so I, was dealing with that grief and with my family. And then subsequently, I went just doubled down on work, got us a grant, and then was the campaign manager for 4 of my colleagues that are on the ballot. So anything to do with myself was just, I wasn't thinking about myself. And so I was really struck when I saw that someone was running unopposed, which is completely undemocratic. I mean, I don't understand how, like George Turner, for instance, has 3 other people running in his race. Erica Wiley has 2 other people in hers. And that's the same. There's only 2 races where there's 2 opponents, and that's where my colleagues are trying to unseat sitting judges, and then Victor Avila running alone. So instinctively, I put my name down, and it's been a go-getting ever since.
Of course, and I really appreciate your sharing this context for us. To be sure, the name of the town where your brother lived, is that Bethlehem?
So Bethlehem is just right across the way from there. That's where I was born. And Bet Jala is Beit, and then the next word is Jala. And so it's in the West Bank, guess east of Jerusalem, on the way to Hebron. On the road to Hebron is where Bethlehem is on the left-hand side, and then Bet Jala is on the right-hand side.
And of course, you are a citizen of the United States. You
Yes.
uh, came to the United States at an early age. When exactly did you and your family get here?
Okay, so my mom is originally from Texas. She was born and raised in Texas and comes from a long line of people in politics and or in being judges. And I think I have like one of her forefathers was helped write the Constitution of Oklahoma. And my mother was a teacher in the Bronx in the 60s. And at that time, she and one of her fellow teachers went traveling for the summer when they had it off, and they were in Europe somewhere. And my mom's friend was Jewish, and her friend's parents said, "Why don't you?" My mom's name is Gloria. "Why don't you and Gloria go to Israel and see? You're so close." And so they actually paid for my mom and her friend to go. And when they got there, they actually ended up spending most of their time with the Arabs in East Jerusalem. And my father owned a nightclub. It was called Henry's. And my mom and her friend went dancing there. And that's how she met my father. And then it's kind of a little bit of a long story, but he ended up coming to the United States. And then they got married in Connecticut and lived in a few different places in the United States. And then I guess in the early 70s, went back, and my mom ended up living there for 10 years. And she taught English to Palestinians at Birzeit University. And so myself and my younger sister were born there. So back in the 70s, when you have one parent that's a United States citizen, then you're automatically a citizen born abroad. And that's what happened to me and my younger sister. And when my parents split up was in 1980. And that's when my mother had, I don't know, maybe like 40 cousins. And one of them happened to be living in Long Beach, California, and they had the space and room and were willing to help us. So my mother, I also have an older sister that was born in New York from my mother's a prior marriage. And so she brought the three of us to Long Beach, California. And I've been in Los Angelino ever since.
Wow, what a cuento, what a story for you and your family. And especially given all your time in LA, I can imagine you've gotten to, especially given the special nature of your work, you've gotten to know people from all across the world with similar cuentos or stories, all of whom could benefit from public defense. And we'll talk about your role as a public defender in just a moment. But first, let's talk about something that we mentioned a little earlier, which is that you declared your race as late as February 13th. And so there's a real special circumstance here because voters can select you for this role for the judicial seat of office number 93, but there's a little bit of a difference in how they may do that since your name's not on the ballot. So can you note with us how voters can write you in for those who are naturally wondering?
Yes. So for office number 93, you'll see one candidate, Victor Avila, and then right below it, you're going to see an empty space. And so what you can do is you can just simply write in my first name, Natasha, and that will count. Or you can write in my entire name, or you can write in just my last name. So when you're a write-in candidate, the Registrar Recorder's Office allows you to choose 5 different variations of your name. And so I chose those.
Right. And to be certain, let's note your website, which is also pretty simply accessible for folks who want to type that right into their browser as soon as they hear of this.
It's Natasha, the number 4, judge.com. It's very
Excellent.
simple and basic.
That's the best way to do it. Now, going into the role a little bit, let's explain what the judicial court here does. I mean, LA Superior Court, that sounds kind of intimidating. And what we want to know is what the LA Superior Court oversees, what judgments they make, who are these not policymakers per se, but these special members of LA County government at folks' service in the city of Los Angeles and also the county of LA.
So judges are going to touch every single part of a person's life in one way or the other. It's as simple of when you get married, you need a judge. When you get a divorce, child support, almost every single facet of your life. If you want to adopt a child, if you are in foster care. So knowing about your judges is critical because they are going to touch your life. So here in LA County, it's the largest judicial system in the United States. Los Angeles County is also the largest county in the United States. We have approximately 10 million people, and we're the most diverse. We have over 100 I don't remember the exact stat, but I want to say it's like over 130 or 140 languages spoken in Los Angeles County. And so the judicial system is incredibly important, and it needs to have access for everybody. So access for interpreters for people that when they come to the court, whether that's in civil or small claims or criminal court. And so it's a complex web. But yeah, what else would you like to know?
Well, you mentioned marriage certificates, you mentioned divorce certificates, for example. LA Superior Court, does that also oversee things as minor as, say, a traffic violation? Does it
Yes,
also oversee pretty serious crimes
yes.
that require serious time and consideration? Tell us a little more about that range.
Sure. All judges, when they're elected or appointed by the governor, can serve in any role that the court needs. I, from my understanding, so if your background is you work at a law firm and you're doing, let's say, civil litigation, then bankruptcy law, maybe, then I think they'll try to put you in an area where you already have your expertise, but that's not necessarily the case. There are some presiding judges um, in Los Angeles who had a background in civil, but then became presiding judges in criminal, for instance. So they can put you, there's over 400 seats in Los Angeles County, which ranges from Long Beach, Pomona, Lancaster, up to Sylmar, and everything that encompasses that. So a judge can then sit in small claims, they can sit in traffic court, or they can be doing death penalty cases. We don't have the death penalty right now, but I'm talking about just the seriousness of the cases.
Right, and also their historic role. We'll also get into a little bit of that number you mentioned, 400 and over 400. I believe it's approximately 431 offices in LA County and for 10 million people at that. And also to be certain, while we're on that note, we should emphasize to the listener that no matter where you are in LA County, you can vote for this seat. This is not specific to a certain side of town or a certain city. If you are within the Los Angeles County area and you're a part of one of the 88 cities other than Los Angeles, which make up this part of the region, and even if you're in the unincorporated communities, of which there are so many, you can in fact vote for this seat. So theoretically or technically, actually, up to 5.7 million registered voters or folks who have ballots in their mailboxes can vote for their judge.
Yes, which is another issue of, I think what I wanted to bring attention to, and people in Sacramento and people that are really interested in changing this, I'm hoping that they will do so, because it's very confusing for the voters when they look at their ballot and they see, different office numbers. Nobody knows what that means. And also they see, like I said earlier, George Turner with having 3 opponents, Erica Wiley having 2 opponents, and then, one person running unopposed, which is completely unfair when all of these civil servants that they're mostly prosecutors and mostly public defenders this year running, they can be assigned anywhere. So immediately one could be serving in Torrance. The next, 2 months later, there's a need in Pomona, then they can be transferred to Pomona. So they're not restricted to a region. They are open to being transferred any which way, any assignment all over Los Angeles County.
Yeah, that is an important note. I do think that it's interesting that judges don't get to pick where they may be. I mean, that also makes sense on a very technical level, but it is key to note that you may be assigned anywhere, including, as you mentioned earlier, to small claims or to something more serious. But obviously, it's rational, or it's rather logical to make sure that a judge has some familiarity with the area in which they'll be serving or the field in which they'll be serving, though that isn't necessarily guaranteed to be the case, as in anything can happen. There's a panel somewhere maybe that decides where any given judge may go, I suppose, but I'm not entirely sure about that part of the process.
Yeah, me neither. Not yet.
Yeah, that's why this is a whole story in and of itself. Okay, now to be certain, you have noted that to serve in this role, to work in law, is actually a calling. Tell us a little bit about what led you to this calling and actually what led you to serve as a public defender and not as a prosecutor, especially given that most of the folks who become judges in LA County historically are from the prosecutorial side.
Well, being raised, my mother, when we got here, I was 8 years old, and it was 1980, and LAUSD was having a strike, and my mom was a teacher. So she could not find a job anywhere becoming a teacher, and she ended up being a temp for a temp agency, and I think it was doing like low-level paralegal work, which is as document reviewing, and um, and so she met some people during that temp job that convinced her to go to night school and to become a paralegal. She had 3 children, and her father was a judge, as were her two uncles. And I think she was, well, I think it's law school is very, very expensive. Number one, back at a paralegal school was not at Cal State LA. And so she would have loved to have been a lawyer, but she ended up becoming one of the first paralegals in Los Angeles when the field was really kicking off. And so I grew up listening to her talk about her work. She mostly worked for big oil companies like Arco, British Petroleum. And so I also would temp there during college and during and before law school or after law school. But at any rate, I grew up knowing that my grandfather was a judge. And then on my father's side, um, the elders many, years ago were also the town leaders. And so they would help solve disputes for the village. They would come to them. And so I kind of always had this I don't know, confidence, I guess, that what my mom instilled in me that I could be a lawyer if I wanted to. The three things that I really wanted to, I went to UC Santa Cruz and was to be a journalist, like
Hmm.
yourself, and or to become a lawyer, or to put on really big, you know, um, like AIDS walks, to be an organizer of big events to raise money and to call awareness for issues. So those were the three things that I kind of had wanted to do. Ultimately, in between college and law school, I decided that I wanted to be a lawyer. And so I went down that path. And honestly, in my job as a public defender, I've gotten to do all of the three things that I've wanted to do. I've not a journalism, but I've gotten to write, and I'm now a grant proposal writer for the public defender's office. So my passion for writing, research, and writing, I've gotten to do that. And then I also put on the Youth Defender and Advocate seminar, and I did that for about 6 years, and now I'm back again co-leading that. And so I get to put on big events as well. So yeah, I grew up. My mom instilled in me that if I wanted to be, I could be the first female attorney in my family on both sides, and that's what I became.
And to be sure, does one get to choose whether they become a public defender or a prosecutor?
Yes,
How does this work?
you can choose by applying. I have many colleagues that where they were prosecutors first, and then they became defense attorneys because they didn't, for whatever reason, that didn't work out. And you can definitely choose. I during law school, I went to Palestine. I was part of what was Palestine Peace Project. It brought about 15 law students from across the United States, mostly on the East Coast, of varying backgrounds. One of the women was originally from Panama. There's, people from Mississippi, one person. Anyway, but there was 15 law students from across the country, as well as 5 professors, I believe. And we went there to each work at a different nonprofit. I worked at the Mandela Institute for Political Prisoners, and other worked for non-governmental organizations that uplifted Palestinian needs or Jewish needs. And so during that, at first, I wanted to be an international human rights attorney. And from my experience there, well, a few things happened. One, I fell into a deep depression, being there in the West Bank for 10 weeks, and I came back to law school in Sacramento, and I met another Palestinian, and he was working at the Sacramento Public Defender's office. And he said, why don't you go in? Being a public defender is exactly like human rights, but you're just doing it locally, you're doing it for a person. And he was absolutely right. It is a human rights, it's a constitutional right to have an attorney, but what brings you to that, it's mostly Black and brown people that are in our criminal justice system, and it's by design, and it's for a reason, and it goes back to the 13th Amendment of slavery. And so, yeah, that was instantly like I fell in love with the work, and now I've been for doing it for, well, I interned there for about a year and a half, and then right when I passed the bar, I joined the LA County Public Defender's Office.
And to be certain in this regard, tell us a little bit about why public defenders actually seem to be so overwhelmed by the amount of caseloads they take on.
Well, there's a lot of people that have criminal cases, and or juveniles, youth. It's just as simple as public defense is not funded properly.
Mm.
It's just that way, and it needs to change. It really needs to change. At the district attorney's office, for instance, there is a witness coordinator on their cases. Literally, like a staff member is a witness coordinator. That doesn't exist at the LA County Public Defenders. We do not have a witness coordinator helping you when you're preparing for trial. We have law clerks that may help you do that, but we actually do not have like a paid position as that. It's a staffing issue. We have lost in LA County, in our office alone. I stopped counting several months ago, but I think we're over 200 attorneys that we have lost since March of 2020. We've had 5 deaths. One was directly due to COVID, but we also had many leave to go to the district attorney's office to help George Gascon with the new policies that he implemented. We lost attorneys to private practice. We lost attorneys to the alternate public defender's office. We lost attorneys to county council. And a lot of that has to do with the great weight of cases. It's untenable in most situations. And the work has expanded now so significantly because we have body-worn camera videos now. Back when I was a trial attorney, just 10 years ago, more than that, 13 years ago, there was no body-worn camera. So in every single case now, we're having to get that, which is amazing. It is a complete game changer. But we have to review it. That takes hours on end sometimes. And the caseloads are heavy because more serious charges are coming. So like the low level cases, the County of Los Angeles, for instance, for youth, they are hoping to divert 85% of the cases to where they don't ever even go to court. They don't even touch probation when they're stopped out on the street. They want them to connect them with a community-based organization and to direct them on a path to where they are not entering the criminal justice system. And so there's many avenues that the county is spending a lot of money to divert people away, because the statistics show like, for instance, a youth is in a juvenile hall, right off the bat that he's got or she's got a 7% higher rate of entering the adult criminal justice system. And so, so what leaves us with the lower level cases being diverted is heavy cases, and a lot of them. And when you have less staff and you have less resources, it weighs very heavily. And a lot of people are also leaving just because of that.
Right. It very much goes back to design, as you noted earlier. And this is certainly a serious flaw within the judicial system as a whole. At the same time, you've noted that the body cam footage has made quite quite a difference. And you've also noted that there are more resources now than there were previously to divert, especially youth, away from the criminal justice system and into some form of rehabilitation rather than incarceration. And on that note, I'm wondering what you think about, given the shortcomings that we've noted, what are some strengths of the judicial system? What are some of the success stories that may actually emerge from the judicial system? Because while it is imperfect, there are inroads to be made, as in so many areas out there.
We definitely have a lot of successes. The criminal justice system can change someone's life. Let's say first we have drug court, for instance. So somebody that has a substance abuse problem and they're accepted into drug court, if they complete and comply with the rules, which typically involves going to counseling, whether individual and group, and sometimes that could be a year, that could be a year and a half. But when that's done, then their cases are dismissed and they have turned their life around, and they have big graduation parties, which is incredible, that I've been to before. And so people, are now drug free or alcohol free and are working, a lot of times reunited with their friends because, I'm sorry, friends and family, because a lot of times drugs and alcohol cause so many problems within a family. And so it helps reunify them. That's one success area. Other successes, we have a human trafficking court out in Pomona. We also have one that's for adult, and that's gaining success because it's organizing and getting, and it's mostly women, or people that identify as being a woman, on the street, selling their bodies for money or being made to do it. So a lot of times it is not a choice at all. They've got, whether it's a pimp or, organized crime, making women, or people that identify as women, or young people. Anyway, so the success with that launched, I want to say, about 2 years ago, and that's in collaboration with the alternate public defender's office and the district attorney's office and the court. So they are helping people. And we also have one for youth. And youth, it's a lot of young girls who are being either kidnapped, brought in from other states, or they're foster youth and they run away because of the conditions. And then they end up being out on the streets and being taken advantage of. But we try to help in a magnitude of ways, and a lot of times we are saving their lives. And that's a collaborative effort between the probation department, the court, the public defender's office, the DA's office. But there's many. We have a juvenile mental health court we're helping. There's many successes that come out of the criminal justice system. It's really
Now,
getting dark in here.
right.
Oh my
Unfortunately, I
God.
can still see you, but yeah, go ahead and grab any light that you can. Now, to be certain, Natasha, what would separate you from your opponent if selected for this seat? This is something that I think should be weighed for our listenership. So tell us a little bit about what would distinguish your tenure for office number 93 at the LA Superior Court from that of your opponent.
Well, I think many factors. One, his only experience as a prosecutor, as I know it, is that he's a trial attorney, and he has very serious cases that he's done. So that's a bonus for him. He's experienced in that, but that's the only, he's just a trial attorney. For me, I have been a trial attorney doing misdemeanors. I did juvenile. I also did adult felonies, serious, including homicides, rapes, arson, you name it. And I then supervised attorneys. I supervised misdemeanor attorneys for almost 3 years in our Torrance courthouse. And then I became a resource attorney, and a resource attorney in the juvenile division means that you're helping youth that have special education needs, going into the school districts and getting IEPs for them, and also going into the regional center for youth that are suspected of being developmentally disabled and advocating for them. So I did that, and then I ended up supervising that entire unit for 6.5 years. And in the course of that, I was our office representative at the probation commission meetings, at the probation oversight commission meetings, at the psychotropic medication meetings, school attendance task force, you name it. There was like, I mean, most of my days were driving, from one hall of administration to, I'm sorry, not hall of administration, hall administration, where the board of supervisors also have meetings, also then to Edelman Court, or we would drive all over town. I was going to meetings. And so I have that experience of seeing, this is where the real policy comes into play, and where judges are forming these committees to say, hey, look, this isn't working right. We're noticing in juvenile, every time we go, let's say, take a tour of the juvenile hall, the girls are all on psychotropic drugs. And a lot of times they're just like over medicated. So they're, you're not having like a real conversation with them. You're having the conversation, but they're very impaired on medication. And so, for instance, and this is a phenomenon throughout the country, where they over medicate youth that are in custody. It's to keep them quiet. It's to help them sleep. It's to, a lot of them do need it for, whether they're bipolar or schizophrenic, but it's, in the majority of cases, they're giving it to everybody. And it's like, not everybody needs medication. And so that was one project, and it's still ongoing, by Judge Nash. And so that was something that I learned going to all of those meetings. So my experience is very different than Victor Avila's experience. And I can bring a lot to the table in areas which he cannot.
Well, given again those special circumstances and given what you've described, I think we've definitely informed listenership about the choices at hand. Now, let's remind them precisely how it is that they may select you for this seat, given all that we've discussed and the urgency of this, since Election Day is less than 3 days away now.
Yes. Well, for office number 93, they can simply write in my first name, Natasha, and that will count. And it's that easy. And I would encourage all voters to vote for the entire public defender slate on the ballot. There's Erica Wiley in seat number 48, George Turner in seat number 39, Lachey Henderson in seat number 97, Kim Rebecca in seat number 124, and Rhonda Heyman in seat 12. And I would encourage everyone to vote for all of them. They're incredibly hardworking public defenders, and they too want to bring their talents and to help the people of Los Angeles.
And that is such a key shout out, and it certainly shows your chops as a secretary or supporter of these slates over the last couple of months. So really appreciate that shout out, especially since with so few days, though I wish I could interview everyone, time is of the essence. One last request on my part is just a screenshot, if that's okay with you, so that I can plug this on the socials and so that we can direct folks over to our podcast as soon as it's published.
Sure.
Okay, let's do it on 1, 2, and 3. Natasha, thank you so very much for joining me for this installment of JT the LA Storyteller podcast. Truly, I've had the judges' seats in mind for quite a couple of weeks now after filling out most of the rest of my ballots. So this is truly an informative session for yours truly, and certainly for the Los Cuentos listenership. I am wishing you luck, and I have to thank you for your service, your 2 decades of service on behalf of the public in LA County.
Thank you so very much. And I'm wishing you much success with your podcast.
Thanks so much. Okay, we'll be in touch.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a great day
You
or
too.
night. Bye.
You too.